North Korea's economy grows by 3.7% in 2024, fastest rate in 8 years. U.S. de minimis exemption ends, raising costs for shippers, consumers. And Turkey severs economic ties with Israel and shut its airspace. Good evening and welcome to the Economic Bulletin, where we start off with Europe, where the Status Office has reported that Germany import prices in July 2025 were 1.4% lower than in July 2024, maintaining the same year-over-year decrease seen in June. This follows a 1.1% decline in May. In contrast, export prices were 0.6% higher in July 2025 compared to a year prior, though this marked a decrease from the 0.7% rise in June and 1% rise in May. On a month-over-month basis, export prices dropped by 0.2% from June to July. Additionally, German retail sales unexpectedly fell by 1.5% in July, which may negatively impact consumer spending in the third quarter. German Labour Office figures have shown that the number of unemployed people has topped 3 million for the first time in a decade, raising the stakes for the government's huge investment plans to deliver quick results. Office President noted that the jump was expected due to poor initial conditions and the summer break. She predicted that unemployment would decrease in September with the start of the unusual autumn market revival.
Im August ist das eingetreten, was wir auch erwartet haben. Aufgrund der Sommerpause ist die Arbeitslosigkeit auf über 3 Millionen gestiegen. Die Unternehmen sind weiter zurückhaltend bei der Meldung neuer Stellen. Die sozialversicherungspflichtige Beschäftigung nimmt leicht zu. Bei der Inanspruchnahme von Kurzarbeit setzt sich der leichte Rückgang der vergangenen Monate fort. Der Arbeitsmarkt ist also nach wie vor von der wirtschaftlichen Flaute der vergangenen Jahre geprägt. Es gibt allerdings auch erste, wenn auch zarte Anzeichen einer Stabilisierung. Im August ist die Arbeitslosigkeit um 46.000 auf 3.025.000 gestiegen.
Additionally, preliminary data has revealed that inflation rose in 4 sizable German states in August, suggesting Germany's national inflation rate could also increase this month. In line with analysts' forecasts, in Germany's most populous state of North Rhine-Westphalia, the year-on-year inflation rate grew to 2% from 1.8% in July. That upward trend was reflected in the states of Bavaria, Baden-Württemberg, and Lower Saxony, where the inflation rate rose to 2.1%, 2.5%, and 2.2% respectively. And still in Europe, the National Institute of Statistics and Economic Studies has revealed that France's economy grew by 0.3% in the second quarter, confirming its preliminary reading and showing that the Eurozone's second largest economy is gaining momentum. The Institute noted that exports saw a moderate rebound, growing plus 0.5% after a negative 1.2% decline in the previous quarter, with a significant boost from a strong rise in pharmaceutical products. Household consumption rebounded slightly to a flat rate of 0.0% from negative 0.3% in the previous quarter. This was a result of increased spending on food and services, which offset a sharp drop in energy spending of negative 2.4%, following a plus 0.8% increase in the first quarter. The National Statistics Bureau Stat has reported that Italy's economy contracted by 0.1% in the second quarter from the previous 3 months due to mainly to negative trade flows, confirming a previous printout. On a year-on-year basis, second quarter gross domestic product in the Eurozone's third largest economy increased by 0.4%. Stats noted that industry and agriculture contracted, whereas services were roughly stable. The Statistics Institute also confirmed 0.5% so-called acquired growth as of the end of the second quarter. National Statistics Institute preliminary data has shown that Spain's European Union harmonized 12-month inflation rate remained at 2.7% in August from the period through July. On an annual basis, core inflation, which strips out volatile fresh food and energy prices, was 2.4%. Moreover, Spain's 12 months national inflation was 2.7%, unchanged from 2.7% in July. Moving on to the Eastern Hemisphere, government data has revealed that Japan's factory output slumped in July as U.S. tariffs bite, and a leading indicator of nationwide inflation slowed, complicating the central bank's decision on the next rate hike timing. Industrial output fell 1.6% in July from the previous month, due partly to a 6.7% decline in automobile production. Manufacturers surveyed by the government expect output to grow 2.8% in August before dipping 0.3% in September. Additionally, stubbornly high food prices have kept inflation in capital city Tokyo above its 2% target, complicating the Bank of Japan's policy. The Tokyo Core Consumer Price Index, the CPI, which excludes volatile fresh food but includes fuel costs, rose 2.5% in August from a year earlier, matching a median market for costs. It slowed from a 2.9% rise in July due largely to government fuel subsidies that pushed down utility bills. However, an index that strips out both volatile fresh food and fuel costs rose 3% in August from a year earlier after a 3.1% gain in July. Thai Central Bank has recorded a current account surplus of $2.2 billion in July, even as signs of an economic slowdown emerged. In a statement, the bank noted that the economy slowed in July from the previous month and is expected to slow further in August as consumption weakens and U.S. tariffs affect exports. Korea's central bank has revealed that North Korea saw its economy grow at the fastest pace in 8 years in 2024, driven by improvements in the manufacturing and construction sectors and increased trade with Russia. The report showed that the North Korean economy is estimated to have expanded 3.7% from a year earlier in 2024, following 3.1% on year growth in 2023. The bank attributed the growth to the actively implemented national policy projects by North Korea aimed at boosting its economy, including the 5-year Economic Development Plan. In terms of contribution to gross domestic product, mining and manufacturing accounted for the largest share at 30.5%, followed by services at 29.8% and agriculture at 20.9%. Moreover, a breakdown of North Korea's economic performance in 2024 by the Bank of Korea has shown that mining and manufacturing surged 7.6%. This growth was fueled by increased production of coal metals, non-metallic minerals, and a rise in heavy and chemical industry output. The construction sector also saw a significant expansion of 12.3%, largely due to a boom in residential building. Rather, in contrast, the agriculture industry shrank by 1.9% because of a decline in livestock and forestry products, while the service sector grew by 1.3%. The report also showed that North Korea's external trade decreased by 2.6% to $2.7 billion in 2024, while exports rose by 10.8% to $360 million. Imports fell by 4.4% to $2.34 billion. Rather, for further analysis, we are joined from London by political and economic analyst Babak Emimian. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to Qnews Economic Bulletin. Let me start by asking you, how would you describe the overall strategy behind North Korea's latest 5-year economic plan, and to what extent do these recent figures suggest it is succeeding?
Well, thank you for your question. First of all, North Korea is a closed economy. The GDP, we don't have access to real information, but the GDP is anywhere between $26 billion to $40 billion a year, which is a very small GDP. But as you mentioned, the economy has improved significantly. The growth has been about 3.7% last year. So the reason for that is because now it's supplying weaponries to Russia. And the reason why this economy is improving is because it has become part of that war machine, which now is growing all the time. We have 3 countries now involved in war economies. One is Ukraine, the other one is Russia, and now North Korea. So the question is, who is going to be the next part of this war machine, which is a big danger to the rest of the world, because we really seriously do not want the world economy to be dominated by war economy. This is exactly what President Trump is fighting against. He wants to spearhead peace and prosperity, but the Europeans, on the other hand, they're not interested in peace and prosperity, and they're actually doing everything to escalate the Ukraine war, which is now we see the effect of it.
Given the significant growth in key sectors like manufacturing and construction, how sustainable is this model in the long term without corresponding growth in other areas like agriculture?
Well, there's a huge poverty in North Korea, so any improvement in any sector is welcomed. And they would not care about the cause of it as long as the growth is there. So the idea is that they are helping the war to escalate in Ukraine, and as people know, they've been sending also soldiers there. It just proves that they really want this war economy to expand, because that's the only way they could actually expand their economy. They're not part of the world global trade. So this would be a way of them expanding with total state control, because if they want their economy to grow, they have to open up the economy. They have to become a market economy like South Korea. But this is not what the regime in North Korea wants. They want to have total control, state-controlled economy, and this war in Ukraine is a good way for them to expand their economy while they're controlling the country totally.
Right. If I may ask you here about the broader geopolitical implication of North Korea's growing economic reliance on Russia, with regard to what you were speaking about and the Ukrainian-Russia or the Russo-Ukrainian war, and how does this affect its relationship with other major powers like China, for instance?
Well, thank you for that great question. Trade is a very strong factor. Trade has been, I mean, since the humans started talking to each other, they started trading. So you cannot stop trade. We've seen that with sanctions. If you want to stop trade, there are always sanction busters. And also profitability is very important. It's I would go as far as saying it's part of natural forces of life, trade. So what I'm trying to get is, if North Korea economy is expanding, there would be by default partners from other countries who would be supplying to them, whether they would be investing in their industries or supplying goods they could have more production so they could sell more to Russia. That would happen. So I wouldn't say that China would not be interested somehow to invest in the North Korean manufacturing or other productions, as long as they know there is a buyer at the end of it, and that would be Russia.
Right. Now, with the overall external trade decreasing while exports are up, what does this tell us about the nature of North Korea's trade and its ability to circumvent or adapt to international sanctions?
Well, North Korea and South Korea has been a case study about the difference between state-controlled economy, how it would lead to poverty, and how in South Korea, market economy would lead to prosperity. We've seen the differences. The capital per head in North Korea is $1,500, $1,500 per year. So that's how much, it's like something like $5 per day. While in North Korea is $33,000 per year. So there's a massive gap. It's like something $100 per day for South Korea and $5 per head in North Korea. So then we go back again. I cannot see North Korea embracing market economy. It's just not there. They don't have the ideology, they don't have the intellectualism, and if they want to do it, they don't know how to do it. So I would say they would just remain a satellite state to Russia, supplying them with weaponry, basic weaponry, and that's it.
Right. From London, that was political and economic analyst Mr. Babak Imamian. We thank you so much for your insights. And now we move for the latest developments from the United States. Department's Bureau of Economic Analysis, BEA, has reported that the U.S. economy grew faster than initially thought in the second quarter, in part driven by business investments in intellectual property such as artificial intelligence, but tariffs on imports continued to cloud the picture. Gross domestic product increased at a 3.3% annualized rate last quarter. The BEA noted in its second estimate the economy was initially reported to have grown at a 3% pace in the second quarter. The U.S. government has ended the tariff exemption for package shipment valued under $800. As a result, U.S. Customs and Border Protection is now collecting standard duties on all global parcel imports, a change that will increase costs and disrupt supply chain models for e-commerce companies, small businesses, and consumers. It offered a flat rate duty option of $80 to $200 per package shipped from foreign postal agencies for 6 months. White House trade advisor Peter Navarro noted that President Trump's ending of the deadly de minimis lawfully will save thousands of American lives by restricting the flow of narcotics and other dangerous prohibited items and add up to $10 billion a year in tariff revenues to the U.S. Treasury. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has announced that Ankara decided to sever all economic and trade ties with Israel and close its airspace to Israeli aircraft, deepening a diplomatic rift over the war in Gaza. During a parliamentary address, Fidan stated that Turkey's recent measures against Israel's military campaign now include restricting its use of Turkish airspace. Fidan also accused Israel of deliberately making Gaza uninhabitable to force its people to leave. For further analysis, we are joined from Moscow by visiting lecturer at Higher School of Economics, Mr. Rami Al-Qalyubi. Welcome to Qnews Economic Bulletin, sir. And let me start by asking you, how will the closure of Turkish airspace to Israeli flight affect Israel's trade, logistics, and transportation costs?
Obviously, Turkey is located in the heart of Europe, so any time its airspace is closed before any airline, it influences it negatively. But at the same time, actually this happens quite a lot, as airspace is often used as sanctions for some political reasons, as is in case between Russia and the West now. The same is for Israel and Turkey. So I think that Israel would find some neutral ways to go ahead and to fly beyond the Turkish airspace. So this is not critical, I think.
So you don't think that it will really affect the Israeli trade? What are the expected short-term and long-term effects on Israeli exports and imports due to the severance of economic and trade ties with Turkey, if it will be affected?
Well, of course, there will be a negative impact, because Turkey is an important trade partner for Israel and at the same time for Europe and Russia and the Arab world. So at this point, any deterioration of trade ties between Israel and Turkey will negatively influence the Israeli economy. But at the same time, as I mentioned, it will not be critical, because nowadays economy and trade are very diversified. So whenever some countries face sanctions, they can find counter-sanctions or some way to go around them.
Mm-hmm. Which specific sectors do you think of the Israeli economy are most vulnerable to the loss of the trade relations with Turkey?
Actually, I have a main victim will be trade, as Israel is a very expensive country in terms of labor and goods, but Turkey is a very competitive economy.
Mm. Now, do you think the
such important supplier is Turkey?
Right. Do you think the disruption would really affect Israeli companies that rely on Turkish markets, supply chains, or partnership?
I don't think that these companies will be destroyed, because actually, if we look on the Russian economy, for example, it's 2 times against sanctions imposed by about 50 countries. So when we speak about really bilateral sanctions between Turkey and Israel, which will have some negative effect, but it will not really lead to collapse of any of 2 economies.
Right, from Moscow, that was the visiting lecturer at Higher School of Economics, Mr. Rami Qalibi. Thank you so much for your insights. Now we move to the latest developments in the commodities sector. Oil prices fell on Friday, but were set for a weekly gain, tugged between uncertainty about Russian supply and expectations of lower demand as the summer driving season in the United States, the world's biggest fuel consumer, nears its close. Brent crude futures for October delivery, which will expire on Friday, fell 0.6% to $68.22, while the more active contract for November was down 0.3% to $67.79. West Texas Intermediate crude futures were down around 0.3% at $64.4. Gold prices held steady on Friday and were poised for their best monthly performance since April, as U.S. inflation data reinforced expectations that the Federal Reserve could cut interest rates next month. Spot gold was up 0.5% at $3,433.99 dollars per ounce. Bullion has gained 4.4% in August. So far, U.S. gold futures for December delivery rose 0.7% to $3,497.3 per ounce. In markets, global stocks showed a semi-collective decline during Friday's session, whereas U.S. and European indices declined, while Asian indices were mostly up. In the U.S., Nasdaq futures fell 1.16%, S&P 500 futures edged down 1.7%, and Dow Jones Industrial Average futures dropped 0.38%. In Europe, the UK's FTSE 100 declined 0.21%. Germany's DAX increased 0.5%, and the France CAC 40 slumped 0.69%. In Asia, the Shanghai Composite increased 0.37%, and the Hang Seng Index gained 0.32%, while the Nikkei 225 lost 0.26%. That brings us to the end of our economic bulletin. Here is what we've been covering. North Korea's economy grows by 3.7% in 2024, fastest rate in 8 years. U.S. de minimis exemption ends, raising costs for shippers and consumers. And Turkey severs diplomatic ties with Israel and shut its airspace. This concludes our economic bulletin. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EGY to stay informed. Many thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.